So good morning everyone, I'm Woo Han, and today I have a presentation on price discrimination, and the market sector that I chose was the Taiwanese transport market. And here's the table of content which I will be splitting my presentation into 7 different parts as listed on the slides. And I will first introduce the transport market in Taiwan and then identify their key characteristics, and then points out some major differences that each company are providing to their consumers. And then lastly, I will have the comparison for their short run and long run profit, and then I will be discussing the consequences of price discrimination. So the first part is the transfer market in Taiwan. And to be honest, Taiwan is not a huge country and it was just an island, so transportation was quite a crucial sector in Taiwan since it allows people to travel conveniently around the island. And without the existence of transport markets, then transportation in Taiwan will be pretty much difficult. And it is for sure that due to the fact Taiwan is not actually a big country, so people wouldn't have the habit of driving cars by themselves, so transportation was actually another substitute for people that don't like to drive cars by themselves. And this sector is a common sector in Taiwan that apply the method of price discrimination that has been discussed in our economics syllabus. And it has like 3 different types of price discrimination, which is the first degree, the second degree, and the third degree. And the price discrimination that were applied in the Taiwanese transport market is the third degree price discrimination. And the third degree price discrimination is selling a service to different groups of consumer, and they classify the group of consumer by their age, by their nationality, by their ethnicity, etc. And the third degree price discrimination that was applied in the Taiwanese transport market is by categorizing people by their age. And there were mainly 2 groups and that were categorized in Taiwan. The main one would be adolescents, which they were age 12 or below, and the second one is adults. However, I have mentioned 3 groups on my slides due to the fact that in some rural areas in Taiwan, they actually categorize people into 3 different groups, which include the third group called elder, which were people like 60 years old or even older, and they will have a even cheaper fee when they abroad the transportation. But it is clear that mainly in Taiwan there are 2 groups categorized by their age, which is the teenager and the adults as being mentioned. And the key characteristic of the Taiwanese transport market, including the consumer age, their socioeconomic status, their lifestyle, and their jobs. So first, the consumer age, typically everyone in Taiwan abroad the public transport system. As previously mentioned at the beginning of this report, the fact that everyone rely on public transportation since Taiwan is a relatively small area and people don't really have the habit of driving car by themselves, so transportation become an effective alternative that enable them to travel across the island and across places that they wish to visit. And the socioeconomic status is usually that there are wealth gaps in Taiwan, but the consumer do not heavily depends on their socioeconomic status, as the fee charged in Taiwan is quite and relative cheap, like around 5 to 10 Taiwanese dollar, which is equivalent to around 0.3 US dollar or 30 cent US dollar. So boarding the public transportation isn't really that expensive, and this sector didn't really heavily depends on the consumer's socioeconomic status. And thirdly, it is a lifestyle. So normally people abroad the public transportation since they don't drive, and for most transportation in Taiwan that they allow people to travel conveniently in both short and long distances. However, like the majority of the public transportation in Taiwan were mainly like buses, taxi, etc., which these sectors are only enabling the citizens to travel in short distances. And the jobs that I gave two example, which are students and office worker, but definitely these were not the only two jobs that rely on this sector, but usually different people with all kinds of job are using the public transportation as a method for them to travel through Taiwan. And next, I have classified the major differences between the service provided by various companies. And one crucial difference is the distance travel. Like, for example, we have buses and taxis, but Taiwan also has a system of high-speed railway. So by uploading a high-speed railway, that you can travel across the whole island of Taiwan, and you can travel up to 3,000 kilometers or even more, which is somehow not achievable by taxi unless you pay for high fees. And for taxis and buses, they aim to travel their consumer by short distances, which it also demonstrates how different public transportation in Taiwan are distinguished by the distance it traveled. Next will be the capacity, and this actually relates to the price of their fees when traveling with the public transportation. So different sorts of public transportation will have different capacities, and this will depend on how much service they will be providing. And also, like on different trains or high-speed railway, they will enable people to eat on the train. So it is another service that is enabled for their consumers. There were also different drinks that were being sold on the train, which is other services that were provided by the various company in Taiwan. And the last one is the ticket price, as previously mentioned, that people operating different sorts of public transportation will have different prices depending on the distance they travel, the time they travel, the food they buy, etc. And I will be comparing two firms in the Taiwanese transport system, and the one on the left side is the Taipei Bus Corporation, and the one on the right side is the Taiwan High Speed Rail. So as listed on the left side, that the Taipei Bus Corporation allows people to travel around the city of Taipei, since it is the biggest bus corporation, the biggest bus firm in Taipei, and to transport people in Taipei. It allows people to visit different parts of Taipei, and it also implies the third-degree price discrimination, as being mentioned. They categorize the consumer by their ages, and the bus company didn't have the strict rule that if you pay more, then you can sit, or if you pay less, then you must be standing on the bus. But people can randomly decide to whether to sit or to stand up in the bus. So it really depends on their consumer, and it is not a service provided by the bus corporation. And the one on the right side is the Taiwan High Speed Rail. So apart from the bus corporation, it allows people to travel long distances with a longer time, and also it provides food, it provides alcohol, it provides snacks on the train, so people can buy and then eat them. So it distinguishes the high-speed railway apart from the bus corporation. And there are toilets on the train, so it is kind of a service that will help solve personal necessities, and yet bus in Taipei doesn't have toilets. Yep, everyone has their own seats and everyone has their own table on the high-speed railway, which is apart from the Taipei Bus Corporation, as well as they don't have strict restrictions about how people are going to sit or stand on the bus. So this also be categorized into the service that the Taiwan's high-speed railway is providing. And next I'll be discussing the short and long run profit of price discrimination. And here we have a marginal cost curve, which is a V shape, And then we have another ATC curve, which is the average total cost curve, is intersecting the MC curve at ATC's minimum point. It is quite clear. And I have categorized two different consumer, which is teenager and adults. And due to the fact that teenager doesn't have work and they don't have their own income, so they must be more price elastic than adults, since they don't have it as constant income of their money, meaning that they will be selecting products more carefully. So when comparing the demand of teenager to adults, teenager will have a more elastic demand. So they have a line that is less steep than the demand of the adults, and the marginal return is just reflecting the two demand curve with two different slopes. And for the teenager, as we see on the PPT slides here is a teenager. It has a elastic demand, so the slope here is not as steep as the demand curve for the adults, as we can see over here. And by examining the teenager part, we can see that at the teenager parts, the marginal curve intersects its marginal revenue curve at this point, right? This red dot, this point over here, and the cost is red right over here. However, this is the cost of the company when they are providing services to the teenager. But due to the fact that the market and the producer is avoiding the surplus, since if they charge their product at this price, then it is clear that the demand will be over here, right? Since this is the market equilibrium, and this will be causing a shortage between the quantity supply and the quantity demand. So in order to resolve this shortage, the firm will be selling their product and their services at the price here, which is P10 as shown over here. And the gap between P10 and the price of ATC will be the profit, which is the box that I am highlighting with my red dot over here. That is a profit when the transport corporation is selling their product to a teenager, which is people that are 12 years old or even younger. The second type of the consumer will be the adults, and it has a more inelastic demand curve due to the fact that they have income, so they are not as sensitive to price changes as the teenager were. And here we can see that the marginal curve of the adults is over here, and the marginal curve intersects with the marginal return curve of the adults, intersects the MC curve here at this point. And for the same reason, in order to avoid shortages, the firm will be selling their price at here, which is P adults. The gap between the P adults and the average total cost, which is this dot, will be the profit that this company is earning, which I am highlighting with the box over here. So we can see that in this diagram, the company have gained more profit since they have two types of consumer. If today the bus corporation only have categorized all consumer as adults, then they will be only having this box of their profit, which is the combination of the yellow box and red box. If today this transport sector only sell the products to teenager, then the revenue will only be this box, which is the red box plus the green box. However, by having a third-degree price discrimination, this firm gain even more profit. The profit now this firm is gaining is a cumulative profit of the yellow box, the red box, and the green box. And yet, for the short run and long run of price discrimination, we can be infer the fact that short run profit will be similar to long run profit. The only changes will be that if there are more firms joining into this industry, and they will be sharing the profit that this company will be already earning, then both the demand of the adults and the demand of the teenager might be even more elastic, as there are more competitors and the consumer will have more options. However, if that doesn't happen, then the profit will remain the same and the company will be able to make money in the long run. And the next is the types of promotion. So I will be using the previous two examples that I have been mentioned. So for Taipei Bus Corporation is that people who had brought the bus more than 15 times will have a 10% discount. So that is actually encouraging people to afford more buses, to have more public transportation, and it is actually good to the society as it will help minimize air pollution. And the second point is that people can buy the 1-day deal and the 3-day deal, but this is especially established for tourists, but locals can also use these cards if they have highly demand on boarding the bus. And the second one will be Taiwan High-Speed Rail, and the first one was that people can buy 10 tickets at a time, and they can use up that 10 tickets in like 1 month. And if you actually divide the cost per time, you will have a cheaper prices per route. And the second one is that a group of people can have 15% off. Like for example, you're a tourist group and you have 40 people, and each person could get a type of discount, which is relatively cheaper than people who just buy one ticket. And depending on different holidays as being mentioned in the third bullet point, there are also 10% of promotion for dinner and lunch that are being provided on the high-speed railway. So it is actually another distinction and services that the high-speed railway is providing, which is lunch and enable your consumer to eat on a train. And there are actually a discount on the food that they provide, so it encourages more consumer to buy that food and eat on a train. And lastly is the consequences for price discrimination. As we can see on the left hand side, for the economy, definitely it is not beneficial, since both productive and allocative efficiency are not being achieved and consumer surplus has been minimized. However, for firm, it is actually great news, since as we mentioned in this slide that the profit of the firm has been increasing of the yellow box, red box, and the green box. So in fact, it is beneficial for the firms, but firms will have greater outputs as now they have a cumulative outputs of both type of consumer. As you can see in the previous example, they have an output for the adults and they have a second output for the teenager. So they have a much greater cumulative output for two types of consumers. And lastly, for consumers, people with more elastic demand will be able to pay lower prices, and vice versa, that consumer with less elastic demand will be forced to pay higher prices. And consumer will be suffer from the consumer surplus that has been existed, as those surpluses will be changed into the firm's revenue. This is the end of my presentation. This is the end of my report, and thank you for listening to my analysis.